So it's that time of year where a lot of people do their state of the collection. So I decided to start with my vintage state of the collection. And then I'll do a more modern or my sort of core collection of watches. Not to say that these aren't part of my core collection. They are. However, I have a modern collection. I have a vintage collection. I sort of keep them separate. I don't know why. It's just the way I work. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to identify each one of these watches for you first, then I'll go through them individually. So this is a vintage Hamilton that was worn by my grandmother. This is a Heuer Abercrombie & Fitch Seafarer. This is a family heirloom as well. This is another family heirloom. This is an Accutron. It has diamonds around the bezel, worn by my uncle. I guess at that time it was in style. I don't know. And then this is a Sears Tradition. This is a watch that I purchased off of eBay. We'll go back to that as well. And another watch that I purchased off eBay. This went through the authenticity process on eBay. It was one of the first watches that I bought through that process. It is a Waltham botha scoff made by Blancpain. It is an actual a watch that was made by Blancpain. We'll get back to that in just a few minutes. A watch that I purchased at a flea market or a tag sale or an estate sale, whatever you want to call it. This is the Speedmaster Mark II, vintage Speedmaster Mark II from the 1970s. Really awesome watch. A great deal I got on that one. Another watch I bought off of eBay. This is the Overpole from Rado. It's essentially a Captain Cook in 37 millimeters. Really awesome watch as well. Speaking about cool watches, one of the coolest watches I think in my vintage collection, well, I mean, there's three obvious favorites for me, four maybe, but this watch is one that I really do love. I just recently did a video on it. This is a Bulova, it's a Chronograph D, just a cool watch. I have it on a really cool strap. We'll talk about that in a minute. Rolex, this is another family heirloom. This was not purchased on eBay. This was another family heirloom, and it is a vintage Rolex. It's actually a very old Rolex, still tells time. I don't think it was ever actually, well, it was definitely serviced, but I don't think it was actually serviced by Rolex, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Concord, this is another family heirloom, and then, of course, my Omega DeVille, another family heirloom. This is a Mariner. Was worn by my uncle. It is an integrated bracelet watch. I think was made by Piaget. And then this is a DeVille. This was never worn by my grandfather. I don't think he ever wore it. It doesn't have a scratch on it. It has a mineral crystal on here, so it's in mint condition. I don't think he's ever worn it. So there you go. That's basically an overview of what I have on the table. I'm going to go through them very quickly individually. I'll throw some of them on my wrist to show you what they look like on my 7.5-inch wrist. So very quickly, I'll start with the Bulova, and then we'll move on from there. So here it is. This is the Bulova Chronograph D. I will start the chronograph for you. Valjoux movement inside, hand-wound Valjoux movement. Barrel case. This was a refinished case. I paid $450 for this on eBay. Prices on these have gone up over the years. However, this one was sort of refinished. The case was refinished, and what they did was they bead blasted the whole case. However, I think it still looks really good. It works really well. The dial is really nice. It's a little bit faded. I think you have replacement hands, but the dial is definitely original. You can see some of the color is still there, but it's not been refinished. You do have an acrylic crystal. It was really scratched when I got it. I just hit it with a Cape Cod cloth, and voila, it looks really good. I have this on a North Street strap. It is a beautiful 18 millimeter crocodile strap from a brand that is located here in the United States. They're just launching. These are handmade in Connecticut, I believe. And they give you the option between a bead blasted or brushed buckle and a polished buckle. I chose specifically for this watch the brushed or bead blasted because of the case. I think it looks really good together. This is a blue crocodile, beautiful strap, and it is actually not badly priced for handmade crocodile strap that's made in the United States. I think they're charging $238, so it's not a terrible price. If you are familiar with the prices on crocodile straps, they are very expensive. So there you go. Beautiful strap, beautiful watch. All in all, one of the nicest watches in my vintage collection. I absolutely love it. I think it's just so cool. But very quickly, and I think you're actually supposed to, when you put this through, you're supposed to put it through here and then through, but I didn't do that. But there you go. Like I said, value movement, you get a date window there. It's framed. 38 millimeters is what this measures in at, around there. 38.7. So it's a big boy for a vintage watch. Very substantial vintage watch, and there's not many of those out there. Very, very cool. Definitely one to check out. One of the bigger hitters in this collection is this. This is the Heuer Seafarer, Heuer Abercrombie & Fitch Seafarer. This is a vintage watch from the 1950s. It was made by Jack Heuer himself, or developed by Jack Heuer himself. It's a small watch, like 34 millimeters, I believe, but you get a bunch of crowns on it, so it does wear a little bit bigger. So 35.7 is what it is, I guess, just around there. It's a little thick for the size, but that's because you get a very boxed mineral crystal. Again, another mineral crystal that I cleaned up with a Cape Cod cloth. I do that very often. But this is basically all original. Have the chronograph running there. Just right there is the tide indicator, because this is a tide indicator. It's made for fishing. This was sold in Abercrombie & Fitch alongside, real equipment that people used. Abercrombie & Fitch wasn't the, shirtless perfume sort of fog that it is now. It was kind of a cool place to go, sort of like Filson, if you are familiar with that brand. They made purpose-built clothing and products. They carried other products that you could use for going to fishing or hiking, or if you were going to go on a hot air balloon or something like that. People like Theodore Roosevelt shopped there, and they sold these watches. These watches are very expensive. These sell between $10,000 depending on the condition, and this one's actually in really good condition. The only thing that's not original is the hands. That's it. And between $50,000. So it could be anywhere between those numbers, which is pretty crazy. And they sell at Sotheby's and places like that. Awesome, awesome watch. Next is a watch that was worn by my grandmother, and it's in very bad condition. This is a Hamilton. It's a really cool tank. I believe this is gold filled. It's missing the crown. Beautiful little movement inside. I've checked it out. You have a small seconds, applied indices. One of them is missing, the 2 o'clock, which is kind of sad. The crown is missing. So this is one that I've contemplated getting fixed, because I think I could probably throw this on my wrist and would be able to wear it, although it is very small. Very, very small, actually. But it has like this Art Deco case, 20 millimeters by 36 millimeters. It's a really cool little watch. I really do love it. Unfortunately, it's in pretty bad shape. Let me show you the Heuer on my wrist really quick, by the way. It's about 35.5 millimeters, almost 36 millimeters. You do have, 3 crowns, 3 pushers, and then a crown. So it does wear a little bit bigger than that. And this is on a Wempe strap. It's just an alligator strap. Very nice strap. I think these go for around $300 or $400, but very, very nice strap. Next, one of my favorite watches in my vintage collection. It is my Botha scoff. It is a Waltham Botha scoff. This was a private label watch made by Blancpain. So this is essentially the exact same watch, except the only difference is it says Waltham on it. That's it. Everything else is exactly the same. This is an aftermarket bracelet that I put on here. So this is not something that actually was original to the watch. However, I think I paid like $20 for this bracelet. It really feels vintage, and that's kind of the reason why I went with it. This is a 37 millimeter watch, and it wears pretty much true to that, 37.1 millimeters. It's a thin watch too, 11.9 millimeters. It gets an AS 1701 A Shields movement inside, bi-directional acrylic bezel. Everything works really well. Tells really good time. You have a little red date wheel right there. Big, nice crown. You could hear the winding. Sounds great. Just a beautiful, beautiful watch. I paid around $2,000 for this watch. It was a little over $2,000, I want to say, around $2,000. And I do not regret buying this watch. It is so cool. Just an awesome, skin diver / dive watch from the I guess it was like the 1960s, late 1970s, or early 1970s, excuse me. Just a really, really cool watch. Anyway, Speaking of cool watches, I mean, that is probably one of my favorite vintage watches, but this is definitely up there. This is my Omega Speedmaster Mark II, a watch that I bought at an estate sale for $650. You really cannot go wrong with that. It was in a lot worse condition. It needed a new glass. It did not need a new dial. Dial is perfect. This is the original dial. They replaced, so I did have it serviced. They replaced the pushers and the crown. I don't know why. They replaced the handset. Again, I don't know why. I told them not to, and I also told them not to refinish the case. And Omega did that anyway, which kind of made me mad. And they also replaced the mineral crystal that this gets. Obviously, it was very heavily scratched, so that was replaced. The bracelet came on the watch at $650. It's a cheap bracelet, very similar to the one that I have on my Waltham, but it works really well, and it looks, it looks the part. I've been looking for a replacement for it, but I don't really need it. I actually do enjoy it on this bracelet. It works very well. And I have a sapphire crystal case back on here because I want to see the movement, number one, and number two, they over-polished the back of the watch, which kind of made me mad. It's a watch that I plan on never selling anyway. I really love looking at the back of the watch. I never get it wet, so I don't care. This is a large watch. As vintage watches go, they actually reissued this watch in basically the exact same size, 41.2 millimeters. It's a big watch for a vintage watch. It's really pretty awesome. You can see at the case, 45 millimeters, and then it's thick too. With this sapphire crystal case back, it's thicker, but 15.3 millimeters. It does wear very comfortably. I have very big hands, so it's a little bit tight getting on, but once it's on, very comfortable, fits really well on my 7.5-inch wrist. And you can see just vintage cool all day long on this. Looks brand new. Like I said, they came out with this. They reissued these. I think they were selling them for around $5,000. You can get a vintage version in this condition, probably under $3,000. And that is really a steal in my opinion. Very quickly, my uncle's watches. So my uncle, both my uncles gave me their watches. One has passed away. One gave me his watch. My uncle, who my son is named after, gave me this watch. This is an Accutron with diamonds. It has applied indices. I guess it was the style back then, so I inherited this watch. It is very special to me. It is an electronic watch, so it is basically an electric watch. You have to pop off the back. It is not a mechanical watch, so it is quartz. And then another quartz watch. This is a Concord. Both of them need batteries. I haven't replaced the batteries on these. This is a Concord. I believe this was made by Piaget. My uncle actually gave me this. It's very thin, and I believe this is around 32 millimeters, so it's a very small watch. Very small crown, so 31.5 millimeters. Very thin as well. But the reason why I say I think it was made by Piaget, because I can't find that much information on it, but the bracelet is immense. This is pretty incredible. Screwed links. Every single link is screwed. You have like a little gold bar that goes throughout the bracelet. It is really nicely fitted together. And then you have the striping in gold that goes through the actual dial, very similar to what Piaget were offering. And then you get day and date there as well. So 34 or 32 millimeters on my wrist, basically 32 millimeters. And you can see, I mean, it wears very small. And you just have that hook, and there's a little bit of like adjustment in it. You could do two positions in here. It's kind of cool, cool for a vintage watch. And then, of course, my other uncle, who has passed away. And like I said, my son is actually named after this uncle. This is his watch with the diamonds. Very, very flashy for the 70s. Obviously, I guess that's the look he was going for. Very nice buckle on here as well. Sort of interesting. It's all gold filled, I believe. I believe the case is actually in gold, but the bracelet is gold filled. And the bracelet is actually made in the United States. I don't know if it's original to this watch. It is fitted to the case, but I'm not sure. But it's very cool. And not something that I would ever wear. It sort of has a hidden crown. Very, very weird watch. But here's another really weird watch. This is another watch that I purchased off of eBay. This is a Tradition Sears Roebuck. So basically, Sears Roebuck, Sears as we know it, had watches, sold watches. They sold Swiss-made watches. This has a locked bezel. It's actually not in great condition, but it tells perfect time. Acrylic crystal that I buffed out, and it's a little bit rough when winding it, but it does tell time and it ticks along really nicely. The hands are really oxidized. The dial is sort of oxidized, but it has a lot of similarities to this watch. It actually has the exact same movement. The A-Shills movement, the 1701. You have the date at 3 o'clock. You have kind of similar indices, kind of similar hands, very similar bezel, acrylic insert as well, very similar crowns. The actual dimensions are very similar, but the cases are somewhat different, and I believe it's a little bit thicker. And this is another 37 millimeter watch. I paid around $200 for this watch, 37.1 millimeters, and it's on the thicker side, as I mentioned, 13.2, not incredibly thick, but thicker than the Waltham. Very quickly, I'll throw it on my wrist so you can see, 7.5-inch wrist. Just a cool looking skin diver that's very affordable, and is made to very similar specifications to very high-end skin divers, dive watches of the time. So these are a bargain at any price, really. They all sell for that range, like $200 to $500. So if you're looking for one, anywhere in that range, depending on the condition. This is not in good condition, obviously, but it's not terrible, and it does tell time. As I mentioned, the bezel's actually really decent for the age as well. Very cool watch for the price if you are interested in that sort of watch, a skin diver watch. Speaking of skin divers, this is a Rado. It's not a Captain Cook. It's actually called the Overpole, which is a Captain Cook with a sort of a world time bezel on it, is basically what you would call it. These were sold alongside the Captain Cook. You do get a rotating bezel. This one is locked as well. I have to fix both of the bezels on those watches. I just have to get around to it. This gets an A-Shills movement. It was a very popular movement at the time. Again, the same as this watch, the same as that Sears watch. It's the 1701. I think it's probably the exact same movement. You could see the dates both in red. Very interesting. This one's around 36.5 millimeters. Another watch that I'm in the process of fixing, 36.5, basically spot on. And it's actually thinner than the Sears watch. It's around 11.8 millimeters, somewhere around there. Acrylic crystal, really domed. This one is gold plated. It came with this really nice single pass-through NATO, which I don't normally love NATOs, but a single pass-through I definitely can roll with. It has sort of a bronze buckle on it that has patinaed with age. I washed it, and it's like a nylon strap, basically. Vintage nylon strap. Looks fantastic on my 7.5-inch wrist. Just a really interesting little watch, and I'm in the process of fixing it up. I'm going to fix up that Sears watch as well. Actually, I messed up the movement in here. You can see it starts moving and it stops and goes. I sort of messed up the movement as I was cleaning the watch itself. I removed the movement too many times. I went back and forth and cleaned it a few times, and I probably should have just left it as it was, and I didn't want to, whatever. I messed it up myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to buy an A-Shills movement with a Rado rotor. So basically a used A-Shills that's working with a red date, so I could replace this movement and then send this movement out for service. Get that fixed because it's actually a pretty simple fix. I'm sure of it because it actually does tell time, and then replace the movement with the original movement, which I think I can do. Last two watches here. Again, sort of sentimental watch. This is my grandfather's watch, who died when I was, I think, around 12 years old. But I have a lot of fond memories of him. This is a watch that he never wore. It's a watch that my mother bought for him when I think it was like his 60th birthday or something like that, 70th birthday. She bought it for him when she was traveling. And she said she paid a couple $100 for it. And it was very sentimental to her. However, he never wore it. As you can see, it's in mint condition. There's not a scratch on it. These glass get a lot of scratches. Mineral glass on here, no scratches whatsoever. Very small watch, obviously. I have a very large wrist. This is a watch that I don't wear very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever worn it, maybe once or twice. But again, I don't want to really damage it either because it's a sentimental watch. Very odd shape on it. So you get a rectangular shape on it, 32 millimeters. And then the lug width is super small on this, 32 millimeters. And then the thickness, and a lot of that thickness is that glass, but still at 9 millimeters. It's a hand wound movement inside, no second hand. So gold filled case, stainless steel case back. Just an interesting watch. You have sort of a sector dial. I don't know. It's kind of weird. And then last but not least, Rolex. I said I'd never own a Rolex, but this is another family heirloom, hand-wound Rolex. This is a gold case with a stainless steel back. You can just see the crown right there. I don't know if it's that visible. Gold crown. I think this was refinished by someone. I believe that they replaced the acrylic crystal because it's basically a brand new acrylic crystal. I also think that they replaced the case back. It has a Rolex crown on here, but I believe this should have a gold case back. However, this does not. And it's very patinaed. The dial is very patinaed. It just says Rolex right there. Everything works actually really well. You have a small seconds there just above the 6 o'clock. It ticks along, tells pretty decent time. Very nice winding on it. And I think this is around 34 millimeters, I want to say. Let's see. 34.7. It's a thin watch because it's hand wound. Acrylic crystal, 8 millimeters. On my 7.5 inch wrist, actually doesn't wear terribly. You can see these go for around $3,000 or $4,000 on eBay. I don't know. The strap is actually almost thicker than the watch itself, which kind of looks weird. So I'm probably going to change the strap on here. I think I need something thinner. You can see that looks weird. I think you need something very thin, nothing too thick on this watch. This is a Strapsco. This is a suede strap. I've had this on a few of my vintage watches because I think it works really well with the vintage watch, but I think it's a little thick for this watch. I've had it on all these watches. I've had it on this watch. I've had it on this watch. Very nice. Anyway, very quickly though, let me come back to this watch because I did not talk about price. This watch I paid $260 for. It was in working condition, except it was in disgusting condition. It was very, very dirty. And like I said, I had to take the basically the watch entirely apart and put it back together, which I did myself. And I did not damage anything except for the movement, which is probably the most important part, which I kicked myself. And it keeps on stopping there. Right between the 3 and the 4 and the 5 o'clock position, the seconds. So obviously something wrong there. But that's it. That's my vintage watch collection. It is continually growing. It usually does not get any smaller. I usually just add to my vintage watch collection because obviously, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like the type of watch that you would end up flipping. If you're buying a vintage watch, it's because you want that vintage watch and you don't really change your mind about it. Maybe I'm completely crazy. I don't know. A lot of the watches I don't wear on a regular basis either. So I feel as though if I'm not wearing it... Oh, this is a Superman watch, by the way. This is a watch that my grandmother gave me. She actually bought me this in the 1980s. I don't think I showed this before, but it's a very sort of sentimental watch as well. Not a vintage watch, I would say, so I didn't actually include it in the video, but it definitely is vintage or important to me and kind of vintage. But anyway, yeah, it's not like I wear these very often because they are kind of delicate. I wear probably this the most and this the most, so the Speedmaster and the Waltham. I do wear the Bulova pretty often, but not incredibly often. And then the Seafarer once in a while to a special occasion. I'll wear that, especially when there's collectors around because people who collect watches love these watches. But anyway, tell me what you think of my vintage watch collection in the comments below. Obviously, a lot of sentimental pieces, so that's kind of part of the collecting experience. And then a lot of watches that I've purchased here and there from different venues, mostly eBay, estate sales, things like that. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It is super helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it. Please follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Watchchris Blog. I have some links in the description. Those links are to Amazon. If you click those links and buy anything, it helps support the channel. It doesn't cost you anything extra. However, I very much appreciate it. Anyway, thank you for logging on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.